They called him a beast, until the flood revealed the truth. There are towns where silence speaks louder than sirens. Ravenhill was one of them. When the flood came, it wasn't the sirens that saved her. It was a dog, soaked, limping, covered in mud and blood, carrying a child in his jaws. To some, it looked like horror. To others, like a miracle. But the truth? It was both. Because the dog they saw wasn't just any stray. He had a badge once, a name, and a mission no one let him finish. This is not just a story about a rescue. It's about the danger of assumptions, the power of second chances, and a child who remembered what the world tried to forget. Stay until the end. Because what really happened in that storm drain will change how you see dogs forever. The rain didn't fall. It attacked. Sheets of water hammered the rooftops of Ravenhill, slamming sideways against window panes like a warning from the sky itself. Gutters overflowed. Power lines sparked in defiance. Streetlights flickered in the storm's wrath, casting trembling pools of yellow light onto sidewalks, now turned to rivers. At 2:07 a.m., Ravenhill's aging storm system, last upgraded when rotary phones were still a thing, finally gave out. The drains choked. Water surged up through manholes, flooding alleys and curling down side streets like a serpent. It poured through gutters, over thresholds, down into the town's forgotten veins, the labyrinth of concrete culverts and rusted steel ladders that snaked beneath the surface. And somewhere in that underground maze, a child screamed. Clara Blake didn't hear the scream at first. She was too busy fumbling with her keys in the dark, soaked from head to toe, trying to unlock the front door while balancing a tote bag filled with scrubs and nursing shoes. The hospital shift had run 2 hours late, short-staffed again, and she hadn't even changed out of her blood-specked ER jacket. She stepped inside, dropped the bag, and immediately froze. "Emma!" she called out. Silence. No cartoons, no toys clinking together, no little voice narrating imaginary adventures with her stuffed bunny, Captain Boots. The house was wrong. Still, quiet. Too quiet. Clara moved fast now, wet shoes slapping the tile. "Emma!" The living room was empty. So was the kitchen. The back door, still locked. Clara's pulse jumped. She darted down the hallway. Emma's room was open, the bed unmade. A small pink raincoat lay on the floor, half damp. The window was cracked. A cold gust of wind fluttered drawings taped to the walls, crayon sailboats and stick figures with giant dogs. Clara's voice broke as she whispered, "No, no, no, no." She dialed 911 with trembling hands. By the time the first responders arrived, most of the neighborhood was awake or staring through curtains, too stunned to step outside. Flash flood warnings blared from phones. Sirens echoed faintly, distorted by the storm. The sound of water, heavy, gurgling, relentless, filled every space. Clara stood on the porch in soaked socks, her hair plastered to her face, hugging herself as if that might keep the world from collapsing. A paramedic approached. "Ma'am, do you know where she might go during storms?" "She likes the drain channels. She races boats." Clara's voice cracked. "She thinks they're rivers." "Jesus," muttered the young officer beside him. They called it in. Units were dispatched to the North Culvert entrance. 2 firemen searched the channel behind Maple Street with floodlights. Nothing yet. The water was moving fast. Brown, frothing, unforgiving. Clara felt her knees buckle. "She's 7. she said, almost to herself. She's just a baby. 1 block away, a battered maintenance ladder clung to the side of a drainage canal, a remnant of Ravenhill's long-forgotten infrastructure. Below it, water churned like a beast in a cage. Lightning flashed, and there, for just a moment, the wind shifted, and someone heard it, a scream. High, sharp, distant. And then, nothing. Deputy Ruiz radioed it in. Possible vocal contact near Sector 3 drainage run. Dispatching units. But they were too far, and the water was rising fast. Back on Maple Avenue, Margaret Langford stood under her carport, wrapped in a plastic rain poncho, eyes narrowed against the wind. She was 74 and had lived in Ravenhill since Johnson was president. Her opinion mattered, at least to herself. She leaned on the railing and peered into the dark across the street. That's when she saw it. Someone, moving low along the curb, soaked and hunched. An animal, a large one, limping. It paused at the mouth of a side drain, nose lifted into the air. Then it turned and looked toward her yard, 2 glowing eyes, gold, intelligent, wild. Margaret gasped and stepped back. "Animal control!" she barked into her landline minutes later. "There's a dangerous dog near the Maple Street culvert. Big, ugly. Looks like it's stalking the drains. You better hurry. I think it's got blood on it." The dispatcher took the call, marked it priority 2. The storm took the rest. Back by the culvert, water burst over the sides, snapping limbs from trees and swallowing garbage bins whole. It was no longer a storm. It was a reckoning. And far off, down in the bone tunnels of Ravenhill, something moved in the dark. 4 legs, 1 injured, nose low to the ground, not searching for shelter, not looking to escape, searching for her. Up on the ridge, Jonas Hale stood on his back porch, cane planted firmly in hand. The wind tugged at the hem of his coat. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat, gathering on the old Marine emblem. The storm had him tense, not because of the water, but the memory it brought. Monsoon season in Kandahar. Rescue dogs going in, some never coming out. The smell of wet earth, blood, and aluminum always found its way back into the wind. Then he heard it, a howl, then another, then a third, each one spaced with uncanny precision, sharp, long, then shorter. Jonas stiffened, his breath caught in his chest. "That's not just a dog," he whispered. "That's a code." 3 howls. Tactical K9 distress signal, trained for search and rescue. No one in Ravenhill knew what that meant, but Jonas did. He grabbed his flashlight, his sidearm, and the worn field harness that hadn't seen daylight in over a decade, and he stepped into the rain, not to escape it, but to answer it. By sunrise, the rain had softened, but Ravenhill hadn't. Floodwaters still slithered through the alleys like it had unfinished business. Debris floated down Maple Street, a child's sandal, a cracked ceramic gnome, the pink backpack with Emma's name faded at the seams. The silence that followed the storm wasn't peace. It was suspicion, and in that silence, stories took root. "He was growling at her, I swear it," said Danny Griggs, the high school janitor, his voice thick with bourbon and fear. "I saw him with my own eyes, big shepherd-looking thing, wet, snarling, right by the culvert." Others weren't so sure. "Maybe he was trying to pull her out," muttered Jamie Chen, who ran the bakery 2 blocks over. "I mean, the girl's still breathing, isn't she?" But the truth didn't matter. Not yet. What mattered was how fast fear could spread when it had something furry and fanged to cling to. and right now Ravenhill was looking for something to blame. Margaret Langford stood at the edge of her front walk, wrapped in a powder-blue coat with a faux fur collar, her silver curls tucked under a rain bonnet. Her lawn, normally pristine, edged to perfection, was a swamp of mud and downed branches, and yet she stood there like a sentinel, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. "He was there," she repeated for the third time, staring toward the storm drain. "That dog, growling, filthy, blood on its muzzle. I've told the sheriff. I've told animal control. No one's done a damn thing." A reporter from the local newsletter scribbled notes nearby. Margaret leaned in, eyes sharp. "They say he saved her? Nonsense! I saw that thing. It was stalking. That little girl didn't get swept into the flood. That beast dragged her down. I've warned this town for months. Stray dogs are dangerous. And now you've all got blood on your hands." Her voice cracked the air like thunder before the storm. 2 blocks away, behind the ravaged gazebo in the public park, a pair of boots crunched through wet gravel. Warden Carter, head of animal control in Ravenhill, knelt near the tunnel entrance. He examined the ground, paw prints, deep, pressed into the soaked earth, some smeared from weight, others cleaner. And there, streaks of red. Not much, just enough. He followed them with a flashlight until the trail vanished into the yawning darkness of the culvert. His radio crackled. "Carter, status?" He clicked to reply. "Confirmed blood trail. Large canine. Likely German Shepherd mix. Still in the area. Orders?" He looked toward the shadowed opening, then back at the drops of red drying on concrete. He hesitated. "Prepare the tranquilizer rifle and notify the sheriff." Meanwhile, on the corner of Cedar and 4th, little Kaylee Harper stood shivering in a yellow raincoat too big for her. She clutched her mother's hand and stared down at the grass by the drainage grate. "He looked sad," she whispered. Her mother frowned. "What, sweetheart?" "The dog, the one with the hurt leg. He didn't bark. He looked at me, like he knew something, like he wanted to say sorry." Her mother crouched. "Baby, you didn't see him hurt the girl, did you?" Kaylee shook her head. "No, I saw him wait. He was waiting. He wasn't scary." The mother didn't answer, just pulled her daughter close. Sometimes truth was too fragile for a town this wet with fear. Across town, Clara Blake clutched a cup of coffee she wouldn't drink. Her hands were trembling. She sat beside Emma's empty bed, staring at the drawing taped to the wall. A German Shepherd in a red cape. "Super dog," it read in crayon scrawl. Clara wiped her eyes. She didn't care if it was a monster or a saint. If it had teeth or claws or blood on its fur. It had brought her baby back. Wasn't that what mattered? But Ravenhill didn't run on reason. It ran on memory. On whispered warnings and garden fences and city codes no one had read since 1978. It ran on the word of people like Margaret Langford, who never forgot a slight or a shadow. And it ran on fear. That afternoon, Animal Control posted flyers. "Dangerous stray in area. Do not approach. Will be euthanized if captured." Below, a sketch from the department files. German Shepherd, approx. 80 palbies. Wounded hind leg, possibly rabid. Subject to local code 4 to 9B. The image looked nothing like the dog who braved a flood, but it didn't have to. That night, as dusk settled in orange-gray over Ravenhill, a shape moved between trees near the maintenance shed. Low, limping, silent. Argos stopped at the edge of the park. He sniffed the air. The scent of blood and chlorine still lingered in his fur. His back right leg burned with every step. But he didn't flinch. He was watching, waiting. The girl, his mission, was no longer in danger, but now he was. From behind a bush, he saw a man step into view, rifle slung low, tranquilizer darts clipped to a side holster. The man scanned the trees. Argos didn't move, didn't growl, didn't run, just watched. He'd faced worse before, but this felt different. This wasn't a battlefield. It was a town afraid of its own shadow. And in their fear, they'd already decided who he was. Not a hero, a beast. The storm had left behind more than water. It left behind ghosts, clinging to puddles in the gutters, whispering through power lines that hadn't dried, hiding in the muddy prints on porch steps across Ravenhill. For most, the night was over. The sirens had faded, and television sets buzzed soft reruns behind closed curtains. But for Jonas Hale, sleep hadn't come in years, and it wouldn't start tonight. He stood in his kitchen, bathed in the soft glow of the fridge door, a leftover pack of cold compresses, and an untouched bottle of bourbon resting beside his arthritic fingers. He didn't need painkillers, not for his leg, not anymore. What hurt couldn't be iced, what haunted couldn't be drowned. He had just shut the door, the hum of the appliance retreating into the hush, when he heard it. One long howl, then a second, higher, sharper, then the third, broken in rhythm, short but deliberate, like a code. 3 notes, buried in the wind, almost lost to the rain's final mist. But not to him. He froze. The air shifted. It wasn't a stray's howl. It wasn't a wolf's claim. It was a signal. 3 howls, deliberate. And for Jonas, a man who had spent 5 years leading K9s through the chaos of Kandahar and Helmand, who had memorized the cadence of canine distress codes, it might as well have been Morse. Alive, but in danger. He gripped the edge of the sink. No one in town would have recognized it. Not Clara, not the sheriff, not the kids whispering rumors by the bike racks. But Jonas did. Because once, long ago, in a night soaked with blood and sand, a dog named Bishop had howled that same code right before dragging a wounded scout out of a burning jeep. Jonas had heard it then, and now, after all these years, again. The porch light flickered overhead as he pulled on his boots, the laces frayed and muddy from the last flood search 2 summers ago. The cane, a custom carbon shaft marked with faded coordinates, leaned by the door. He grabbed it without thinking. Outside, the air still smelled of ozone and wet pine. Somewhere deep in the woods, the water still moved, slow now, but mean. He swept his flashlight once across the tree line, paused, then moved toward the back gate. The floodplain lay just beyond the old mill road. Tall grass, swallowed drainage pipes, forgotten things. It was also the place where sounds didn't echo like they should, where calls went to die. Jonas limped through the mud, jaw tight, breath low. The howl had come from this direction. He didn't know what or who he'd find, but instinct doesn't need permission. It only needs memory. The beam of his flashlight danced along the brush, slicing through fog and low-hanging branches. He followed the tire ruts first, then the footprints, scattered, overlapping, one set canine. He stopped when he found claw marks near a low concrete culvert. A torn child's bracelet glistened in the grass. The beads spelled Emma. Jonas swallowed. Then, like breath returning to lungs after a blackout, the sound came again. One low, sustained note. Another, shorter. angling up like a question. Then a third, quieter, raspy, but precise. 3 howls, same rhythm, same plea. Jonas raised his flashlight and slowly scanned the culvert mouth. It yawned open like a throat to another world, dark, slick, the water around it curling like a warning. Movement flickered inside. He crouched slowly, letting his knees scream beneath the weight. And then he saw it. 2 glowing eyes, low to the ground, watching, not predatory, not panicked, just present. The dog didn't move, didn't growl, didn't flee. It just stared, as if it recognized Jonas too, as if it knew this was its last chance to be heard. Jonas didn't call out. He didn't clap or whistle like others might. Instead, he knelt deeper, placed the flashlight on the ground facing upward, and tapped his cane twice against the metal grate beside him. Clink, clink, pause, clink. A response signal, one used by trainers to confirm intent. The dog blinked. Then, slowly, lowered its head, resting it on the rim of the pipe. Mud coated its neck. One ear bent, torn. The fur on its chest was matted and red, but its breathing was steady, and its posture wasn't aggressive. It was trained. Jonas's heart dropped. This wasn't just a lost dog. This was a working dog, a trained canine, and it had tried to signal the only way it knew how, through instinct, through memory, through a howl that had once saved men like Jonas from never coming home. He stood slowly, ignoring the searing pain in his hip. "We've got it all wrong," he muttered to the fog. He turned back toward town, toward the streetlights that flickered above Ravenhill Square, where people like Margaret Langford were sharpening pitchforks out of fear. He looked one more time at the dog. "You didn't drag her under," he whispered. "You pulled her out." And without another word, Jonas turned and began the long limp back into town. But this time, he wasn't returning alone. He was returning with truth, or at the very least, a reason to make Ravenhill listen. The raid wasn't supposed to last more than 6 minutes. Dallas Narcotics had planned it down to the second. Aerials, thermal imaging, breach points, the works. 2-story warehouse, eastern wall entry, 9 suspects, moderate threat level. What they hadn't planned was the crack in the floor. Argos had smelled it before anyone felt it. He was still, ears perked, nose twitching, standing beside his handler, Officer Jake Purnell, in the far corner of the upper deck where the fumes from meth cookers drifted thick and metallic. The air burned. But Argos wasn't sniffing for drugs. He was sniffing for the earth, for movement, for something older than the war on crime. Jake didn't notice it at first. He was focused on the suspect ahead, crouched near the supply crates, hands trembling, ready to bolt. Jake tightened his grip on the leash, voice low. "Wait, K-99, wait." But Argos wasn't waiting. He moved, one paw, then another, low. "Deliberate," Jake hissed again, louder this time. "Argos, stay!" But the dog didn't stay. Instead, he turned, eyes locking with his partner's, and lunged, straight into Jake's ribs. The world went sideways. Jake landed hard against the west wall, just as a deep groan split the air, like the warehouse itself was exhaling its last breath. The upper deck shuddered, then dropped. 600 pounds of steel grating and rusted support beam gave way beneath the spot where Jake had just stood, right where Argos had been. The roar of the collapse swallowed the shouts of the other officers. Dust filled the air like a curtain of ash. Someone screamed, "We've got a man down!" But it wasn't Jake. It was Argos, buried up to his haunches in twisted pipe and concrete dust, blood seeping from his hind legs, but alive, just barely. Jake was the first to reach him. "God, Argos!" His voice cracked, one hand shaking as he brushed brick shards off the dog's face. "Hold on, buddy. Hold on." Argos blinked slowly, his breathing shallow but even. His body was pinned beneath a collapsed beam, his front paws twitched, still trying to crawl forward, still trying to do his job. The paramedics called in an extraction unit, but it took 17 minutes to lift the debris enough for a stretcher. By then Argos had lost feeling in both rear legs. Jake never left his side. Not in the ambulance, not during the 2-hour surgery, not when the vet came out, eyes low, and said softly, "The spinal compression is permanent. He'll walk again, with rehab, but not for duty. Not for duty." Those 3 words ended a career decorated with 3 commendations, 2 drug busts, 1 hostage rescue, and a letter of honor from the governor himself. Argos had saved lives. And now he was being discharged like a faulty part. The official paperwork came 2 weeks later. K-99 to be retired effective immediately. Suitable for civilian placement. Handler reassignment pending. Jake stood at the desk of the K-9 Division Chief, fists clenched. "He took my hit, sir. That beam would have crushed my spine, and you're shipping him off like a broken crate?" The chief didn't flinch. "The department can't afford liability on a half-mobile dog, Jake. He's non-operational." "He's family." There was silence. Then the chief added, softer, "That's exactly why you don't want to keep him. He needs more than memory. He needs peace." Jake stared down at the discharge form, then signed. 3 days later, a transport unit arrived. A white van, no markings. 2 handlers Jake didn't recognize, 1 clipboard, 1 muzzle. Jake knelt by Argos, who was still limping but alert, ears flicking with every sound. The harness was gone. So was the badge. All that was left was a dull collar with the word "retired" stitched into the fabric. Jake scratched behind Argos's ear, the place he always did before raids. "You were the best partner I ever had, K-99, the best. I don't care what any suit says." Argos nudged his hand gently, as if he already knew, as if goodbyes were just another part of the mission. The driver opened the van door. "Let's go." Jake looked once more into those eyes, steady, focused, calm, and whispered, "Last command, buddy. Ride safe." Argos walked up the ramp without hesitation. He never looked back, and the doors shut. In the silence that followed, Jake stood alone in the parking lot, the scent of antiseptic and exhaust in the air. The Texas sun burned through the clouds. He pressed one hand against his chest, where the badge used to sit, and whispered to no one, "You didn't fail." He just didn't know yet that someone else would. That Argos's ride wouldn't end in a warm house and backyard toys. That somewhere outside Ravenhill, in the middle of nowhere, the last real K-9 of Dallas PD would be told one final word: "Stay." And left. The van veered off County Road 17 just after dusk. The sky hung low with thunderclouds, bruised purple and green at the edges. Crickets had fallen silent. The gravel shoulder crackled under bald tires as the transport vehicle rolled to a stop beneath a flickering highway lamp. Inside the cage in back, Argos stirred. He hadn't eaten since sunrise. A dish of dry kibble sat untouched, sterile, unfamiliar. His ribs, still bruised from the collapse, ached with every curve in the road. But he made no sound, didn't whine, didn't bark. He was trained better than that. The driver, a man in his 40s with a clipboard and an overworn patch that read State Logistics, cursed under his breath, checking the route map. GPS is fried, and I'm 2 hours late to Lubbock, he muttered. He glanced back toward the kennel. You're not on my next manifest anyway. Then, louder, like trying to convince himself it was protocol. Interim placement. Someone will come get you. No one had told Argos that. No one had told Jake either. The side door creaked open. A gust of humid wind swept through the van, rustling the papers on the dashboard. The man grabbed a lead rope, clipped it to Argos's collar, and gave a half-hearted tug. Let's go, old boy. Argos stood without resistance. He stepped down into the weeds, his hind leg trembling slightly under the strain. Still, he kept his posture firm, like walking onto a crime scene, not a ditch. They were at the edge of nowhere, a rural junction where a broken payphone slumped beneath a leaning signpost. Fulton Creek, 3ME. The woods nearby looked thick, impenetrable. The driver turned in a circle, half expecting headlights to crest the hill. But there was no one, not a soul. He knelt and unhooked the leash. His eyes didn't meet Argos's. Instead, he pointed to the grass, palm flat. Stay. Argos froze. To him, that word meant trust, meant the handler was coming back. The man patted his thigh once, a mock gesture. You'll be fine, soldier. Better out here than a cage. Then he turned and climbed back into the van. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared. And Argos? He didn't chase. He stayed. Because that's what good dogs do. The taillights faded into the horizon. And still, Argos stood. The weeds danced around his paws. The first drops of rain began to fall, warm and scattered, soaking the dust on his fur. He waited through the night, curled under the bent payphone, one ear alert, one eye watching every car that passed without slowing. By dawn, his paws were caked in mud, his stomach cramped. A raccoon hissed at him from a bush, but he didn't react. On day 2, a delivery truck paused at the junction, engine idling. The driver opened the window, threw out a sandwich crust, then kept going. Argos sniffed it, ignored it, stayed. His hip throbbed now, a deep, burning pain that echoed down to his toes. The ground was no longer familiar. His world had changed, not with the collapse of a building, but with the silence that followed it. By the morning of the 3rd day, Argos's ears had lowered, not in fear, in surrender. He limped to the far side of the ditch, where a rusted billboard offered shade, and finally ate the crust he had buried near the brush. The peanut butter had gone hard. That night, he walked, not far, just far enough to leave the junction behind. Step by step, he moved into exile, not with drama, not with defiance, but with the slow, resigned gait of a soldier who obeyed one last order and was never relieved of duty. Somewhere, miles away, a file remained unclosed. Argos, placed with verified civilian guardian. But there was no name, no phone number, just a quiet lie typed into a government form. Because dogs like him weren't supposed to die in the wild. They were supposed to disappear. Ravenhill Park had seen better days. The grass was patchy in places, the sandbox always a little damp. Swings creaked even when the wind was still. But on quiet afternoons it offered something rare. Silence that didn't ask questions. Jonas Hale liked it that way. He walked the perimeter with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a man who'd once marched beside tanks. His left leg dragged slightly, the legacy of a bomb no one talks about anymore. In his right hand, a cane carved from mesquite clicked against the stone path with each step. It was late October, and the air carried the kind of cool that whispered of endings. He didn't come for the park benches. He came for the silence. But that day, something was different. He saw it first from across the green, a flicker of movement beneath the old wooden gazebo. At first glance, it looked like a shadow, or maybe a trick of light through the slats. But then the shadow shifted, deliberate, weighty. Jonas stopped walking, tilted his head, and squinted. There, under the gazebo, lay a dog. Not curled, not lounging, just watching. Its coat was thick with mud and thistle, patches of fur matted into dull ridges. But the frame beneath, the structure, was unmistakable. Shoulders like a soldier, paws like landing gear, a scar slicing through the ridge of its left ear, and the eyes. They weren't the eyes of a stray. They were the eyes of someone waiting for a command. Jonas stood still, longer than most people would. He knew better than to speak. Words were just noise to a creature that had been trained to trust tone, posture, silence. Instead, he slowly crouched, with a wince and a breath through gritted teeth, and set his cane on the grass beside him. The dog didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't growl. Only the eyes shifted, tracking his every motion. Jonas placed his palm flat on the ground, not reaching, just being. A moment passed, then another. Then the dog blinked and turned its head away, not in disinterest but in calculation, as if deciding too soon. "Smart boy," Jonas muttered under his breath. He reached into his coat pocket, slowly, and pulled out a strip of beef jerky, the kind he kept for long walks and long silences. He slid it across the grass with a flick of his fingers. It landed just shy of the gazebo's steps. The dog didn't move, didn't sniff. But the eyes flicked down, then back up, then down again. Jonas smiled. It wasn't joy, more like recognition. "You've had training," he whispered. That's when the dog rose, not with panic, with purpose. Every muscle moved like it had been sculpted by duty. Even limping, he carried himself like something forged, not born. The dog stepped forward once, twice, then stopped, close enough to scent the jerky, close enough to test the air, but not close enough to trust. Jonas didn't push it, didn't say another word. He simply nodded, collected his cane, and stood. The moment held. Two figures framed in autumn light. One man, one ghost, neither quite sure what they were to the other. By the time Jonas reached the edge of the park, he turned once more. The dog was gone. Only the jerky remained, torn in half, teeth marks precise and clean, not scavenged, accepted. That night, Jonas sat by his fireplace, the cane propped against the arm of his chair. He stared at the flames like they owed him something. In his lap sat an old leather folder, worn at the corners, filled with yellowing photos and commendations no one read anymore. He flipped to one, a photo of K9 units lined up under desert sun, dust on their muzzles, metals glinting, men behind them with tired smiles, and one badge number scribbled in the margin, K99. He didn't know why it whispered in his head now, but he remembered what those dogs looked like when they weren't afraid. 3 nights later, the jerky was gone again. So was the sandwich he left beside the trash bin. And the water bowl? Empty, not tipped, not spilled, just empty, like a thank you without a sound. Jonas exhaled slowly, as if something long buried was turning over in the dark. Maybe, just maybe. That dog wasn't running. Maybe he was circling, watching, testing the line between ghost and guardian, and maybe, just maybe, the war in both of them wasn't over yet. The rain had come and gone like a whispered secret. It left behind slick sidewalks, puddles that shimmered like spilled sky, and gutters swollen with curiosity. For most in Ravenhill, it was just another Tuesday in early November. For Emma Blake, age 7 3/4, it was race day. She crouched by the edge of the back alley, hands cupped around a damp golden leaf, her newest racer. The stem pointed forward like a rudder. On the underside, she'd drawn a smiley face with a purple marker, though it had smudged a little. "Captain Floaty Pants," she whispered proudly. "Let's win this time." The storm drain ran the length of the neighborhood, a narrow concrete groove hidden behind fences and forgotten flower beds. Where others saw runoff and mosquito water, Emma saw rivers, channels, adventure. Her leaf boats were her crew, and no one knew she was here. Her mother, Clara, had pulled another double shift at County General. The sticky note on the fridge had said, "Back by 9. Frozen lasagna is yours. I love you more than chocolate." The neighbor, Mrs. Collins, was supposed to check in, but the TV always seemed louder than her footsteps. Emma didn't mind. She liked quiet, and she liked him. The stray had first appeared a week ago, just a shadow at the edge of the woods behind their fence. Then a glint of eyes. Then, one morning, a paw print in the soft soil by the compost bin. He was big, way bigger than the labradoodle next door. His fur looked like storm clouds dipped in earth, matted, tangled, but regal somehow. He never barked, never came close. But every time Emma slipped through the broken fence slat with her backpack full of peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices, he was there, watching, still, like a knight guarding a forest only she could see. Today she hadn't seen him, not yet. She gently set Captain Floaty Pants into the stream and watched it bob along the current, racing past a twig, dodging a crushed soda can. She giggled and clapped, then turned her head slightly. He was there. Again. Same spot. Just beyond the chain-link fence, under the dying mulberry tree. Muddy paws, low stance, ears half back, but not afraid, just waiting. Emma grinned, reaching into her hoodie pocket. She pulled out a triangle of white bread slathered in peanut butter, wrapped with a care that only a 7-year-old can achieve. Slightly squished, but still whole. "I saved the corner. That's the best part." She held it up with 2 hands like an offering. He didn't move, didn't blink, but his nose twitched, almost imperceptibly. "I named you already," she whispered. "Want to guess?" The dog stayed still. She inched forward, slow and patient, placing the sandwich at the base of the tree stump like always. "Super dog. Because you always show up when I need a break." She sat cross-legged on the grass, tracing the water trail with a twig. Captain Floaty Pants had vanished beneath a pile of leaves, lost to the drain gods. "Don't worry," she said to no one. "We've got more captains." She didn't see the dog move, but when she looked back, The sandwich was gone. Only a faint set of prints remained in the mud. She leaned forward, squinting. "You are fast." The clouds began to thicken again, the kind of gray that turns air into warning. Emma didn't notice. She was busy folding another leaf, smoothing its spine, balancing a small button in the center like a captain's chair. Behind her, the wind shifted. The first drops tapped her shoulder like fingers trying to whisper something important. She shivered. Not from cold. From something else. The kind of feeling you get when someone's watching. But not in a scary way. In a caring way. She turned. Superdog was still there. Still watching. Still waiting. The thunder came soft at first. A low roll, like a distant drum beat. Then heavier. Closer. The kind of sound that made grown-ups close windows and check the basement pump. Emma hesitated. Her shoes squelched in the grass as she stood. She glanced back toward the house, then back at the stream, and then at him. He was no longer under the tree. He was near the drain now, standing, still, like a statue carved from memory. She blinked. And in that moment, a gust of wind stole her leaf from her palm. It danced like a frightened bird, skipping along the path of the drain. Emma chased. It wasn't far at first, just to the bend where the water dipped beneath the road. But the path was slick. Her foot slipped. She caught herself, laughed. "I'm okay." No one heard. The leaf spun again, downward, further, into the culvert where the water pooled darker, deeper. She ran faster, one more step. Then her foot vanished. Then her leg, then the scream. Superdog moved before her voice faded. No bark, no panic, just power, motion, instinct. He lunged through brush and water, cutting through the current like it was memory. The girl was gone, but her scent wasn't. And for the first time in a long time, Argos, badge K99, knew exactly what to do. The peanut butter was starting to melt just a little, soaking into the crust like sunlight slipping through old curtains. Emma held the sandwich out in both hands, careful not to flinch. The dog, no, not just a dog, stood 10 feet away, half in shadow, half in late afternoon gold. His fur was caked in dried mud. His ears tilted like they were listening to something the world had forgotten. One eye was amber, sharp as an old soldier's. The other, dulled by a foggy film, blinked slower. Still, he didn't move. Emma stayed still, too. It had been 4 days since she first laid eyes on him. 2 days since she began leaving crusts under the fence post. But today, she wanted more. "I made it myself," she said, voice barely above wind. "No jelly. You don't seem like a jelly guy." The dog's nose twitched, twice, then a step. Not a lunge, not hunger-driven madness, just one step closer. She didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't dare breathe. The dog moved again, slower than rain-down glass, until he was near enough for his breath to tickle her fingers. He sniffed. Once, twice, waited. Then gently, carefully, his teeth brushed the sandwich free from her palms. He stepped back, laid it on the ground, and sat. Only then did he eat. Emma's chest swelled like she'd just passed a test no one else could see. She didn't cheer, didn't clap, just smiled, wide and warm. The kind of smile only children and saints still remember how to give. "I knew it," she whispered. "You're a super dog." The dog looked up at the word. No tail wag, no bark, but something flickered behind his tired eyes. She pointed toward the storm drain, where 3 leaves she'd folded into boats floated lazily past a stick. "Want to help me pick the winner?" He didn't move. Not at first. But he didn't leave either. She took that as a yes. They sat like that for a while, the girl cross-legged on the grass, the dog poised like an old guardian relearning how to sit still beside Joy. She explained the rules of leaf racing as if it were an Olympic sport, told him how her favorite captain, Floaty Joe, kept winning. But she suspected foul play, asked him if dogs had ever been referees. He blinked once, twice. No answers needed. His presence was enough. When a breeze picked up, scattering the next fleet of leaf racers down the drain, Emma pointed, laughing. "Oh, that one's got a curl in the stem. She'll take the turn faster." The dog's gaze followed hers, and for the first time since the collapse, since the transport, since the betrayal that taught him silence, Argos let his tail move. Just once, a tiny flick, like the last ember of a long-forgotten fire, testing the wind again. Emma didn't notice, but somewhere deep inside her, she felt it. She scooted closer, a peanut butter smear on her sleeve, and whispered, "You're not a stray. You're just waiting to be found." The wind came first, not loud, not angry, just wrong. Argos raised his head, ears angling sharply east. The clouds above Ravenhill had turned the color of ash-soaked steel, the kind of sky that made birds vanish and dogs remember storms long past. Emma didn't notice. She was on her belly, elbows muddy, eyes wide with delight as her latest leaf boat spun into a tight whirlpool before shooting out the other end of the storm-drained tunnel. "Did you see that?" she giggled. "That one did a flip." Argos didn't wag his tail this time. He stood, rigid, watching the leaves, watching the water, smelling the shift. He took one step forward, then another, nostrils flaring, not for food, not for threat, but for pressure. Something deep in his spine twitched, a sensation only rescue dogs remembered, the kind they never trained for but learned to obey. It wasn't the thunder. It was the silence before it. Emma crawled forward, chasing her Captain Flip-Leaf boat with reckless excitement. She leaned too far, palms in the runoff, sneakers sliding. Argos let out a low, clipped bark, not loud but sharp. A warning. Emma turned to smile at him. "It's okay, boy. I'm just—" Her feet slipped, and the drain roared open. The water didn't come like a wave. It came like a trap door being pulled open beneath the world. Emma screamed, not the high, startled sound of a child, but a terrified, choking gasp, swallowed by a cascade of brown, churning storm water. Argos lunged, no hesitation, no doubt, just pure, immediate instinct. He hit the water like a fallen branch, sideways, limbs splayed, teeth clenched to avoid swallowing runoff. He couldn't see her, couldn't smell her. The filth overwhelmed everything. But he swam forward anyway, against the pull, each stroke powered not by sight, but by memory, by the sound of her laughter, by the peanut butter on her sleeve, by the only moment of trust he'd felt in months, a sandwich in small hands. Then he found her. Or rather, his paw brushed something soft. Her coat. She was trapped under a cluster of debris, her shoulder wedged under a bent fence post half submerged by floodwaters, her mouth barely above the surface, eyes wide in terror, hair plastered to her cheeks like black seaweed. Argos snapped forward, biting the wood. It wouldn't move. He braced his back legs against the concrete drain wall, growled low and deep, and yanked. The wood cracked. Not fully, but enough. Emma gasped and flailed, then lost her grip again. She slipped away. Argos dove, not like a swimmer, like a torpedo, limbs streamlined, jaws locked. His teeth clamped down on the collar of her raincoat just as she went under. He turned, paddling against the surge, each beat of his heart screaming too slow. But inch by inch, he pulled her toward a narrow break in the tunnel, a maintenance alcove with a rusted ladder half covered in moss. He shoved her toward it. She caught a rung, coughed, cried, clung, and Argos, chest heaving, flanks soaked, legs trembling, stayed beneath her, anchoring her. The thunder finally hit, loud enough to rattle windows, but Emma didn't hear it. She only felt warm, wet fur beneath her hands. And in that moment, the roar of the world faded. The ladder was cold, not the kind of cold you feel on a chilly morning, but the kind that seeps through bone, numbs fingers, and makes the world blur at the edges. Emma's hands gripped it anyway, white-knuckled, slipping, bleeding. She was screaming again, though her voice had long since gone hoarse. The sound came out cracked and shallow, swallowed by the chaos around her, a storm too loud to care. Above, the drain tunnel trembled under the weight of the water. Below, the current tugged at her shoes with every angry pulse. Rusted rungs bit into her palms. Her legs dangled. She couldn't climb. She couldn't move. She was alone, until she wasn't. A low, strained whimper broke through the roar, then a splash. Then fur, wet, heavy, familiar. Argos pushed through the rising current like a wolf through fire, not swift, not graceful, but driven, determined. His paws scraped across the slick concrete as he reached her, chest deep in floodwater, sides heaving. He didn't bark, didn't whine, just got close enough for her to reach. "Super dog," she whispered, half conscious, half dreaming. And with all the strength a 7-year-old could gather from a storm-torn body, she let go of one rung and wrapped her arm around his neck. Argos didn't flinch, didn't shift. He positioned himself beneath the girl, bracing with his back legs, body angled against the current, forming a living anchor. The water surged. Emma screamed, but her scream ended not in terror, but in contact. Her hand found fur again, her cheek pressed against his soaked shoulder. She wasn't floating anymore. She was held. Minutes passed. She wept quietly now, not from pain, but from exhaustion. Argos stood as still as his battered legs would let him. The current battered them both, but he absorbed most of it, like a seawall built from muscle, instinct, and something deeper than training. Something older. He didn't know what time it was, didn't know if help was coming. All he knew was she was still breathing, and as long as she clung to him, he would not move. Not even death had permission. Her voice came again, a sliver of sound through chattering teeth. "I'm tired." Argos leaned into her, just enough to shift her body up, give her a firmer grip. His hind legs trembled violently. One slipped. He re-anchored. "Don't let go," she murmured. "Please." He didn't. He wouldn't. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the tunnel like a photo negative. For a brief second, their reflection shimmered in the water, girl and dog, fused by fear, faith, and flood. Then darkness swallowed it again. On the ridge above, no one saw them, no one heard. Not yet. But the storm had met its match, not in power, not in speed, but in stillness. The kind of stillness only a creature who had once stood beside firemen, soldiers, and ghosts could endure. Argos's body ached, his lungs burned, but he stayed. The girl on his back no longer cried. Her fingers tangled in the loose fur behind his ear. And in that forgotten corner of Ravenhill, beneath pipes and rust and rot, something unexplainable happened. A child stopped drowning because a dog refused to move, The storm wasn't done. Rain hammered the earth like it was trying to erase it, and the water, brown, angry, alive, kept rising. Argos knew the girl couldn't hold much longer. Her breathing had grown shallow. Her fingers had loosened from the ladder. She was slipping. He turned. His eyes scanned the floodplain, but not in panic, in calculation. 10 feet upstream, half submerged beneath broken branches and debris, was a narrow concrete pipe, a runoff tunnel meant to redirect overflow. Higher ground, barely. He let out a low whine, half warning, half encouragement. Then he moved. He nudged her first with his nose gently against her shoulder. She stirred, moaning. "No." Another nudge, firmer. Then his teeth, not biting, but guiding, caught the collar of her drenched jacket. He pulled, just a few inches. "Super dog?" Her voice was a thread. He let go, whined again, took a step back, deeper into the current, and angled his body toward the pipe. Emma blinked. The tunnel. She saw it too now. Or thought she did. He barked, just once, urgent. Then he moved again, upstream, closer to it, then stopped, turned, waited. Emma's fingers tightened, her arms shook, but she followed, one step, then another, slipping, crawling, sobbing, but moving. She was no longer just a girl in a flood. She was a girl following something. Someone. Argos reached the tunnel first. He shoved debris aside with his shoulder. Branches snapped. Water sloshed behind him like a warning. When Emma reached him, she was crying hard now. Not from fear, but from everything else. Cold, shock, confusion, and some part of her too young to understand she'd almost died. He stepped aside to let her crawl in first. The space was just wide enough for her small frame, but barely. She crawled inside on hands and knees, her sobs bouncing off the concrete. "I want my mom," Argos followed, back paws dragging, chest scraping wet stone. Inside, the tunnel was darker than night. No echoes, no light, just the sound of breath and rain and the occasional growl of thunder in the world above. Emma collapsed near the curve of the wall where the pipe slanted slightly upward. Safer. Argos crawled beside her, then stopped, and lay down. The girl turned into him instinctively, as if her body knew before her mind did that this creature was safety. She tucked her head beneath his chin. His fur was wet, but warm, and his heartbeat steady. One thump, then another, like a drum beneath the earth. They stayed that way. Two souls pressed together in the hollow bone of the storm. The air smelled of rust and rot and river water. But Emma didn't pull away. Her arms curled around Argos's neck like a child clings to memory in sleep. He shifted slightly, curling his body to match hers, absorbing the cold with skin already raw. The only sound from him now was breath. Even the storm, in time, seemed to take a step back. No one would find them yet. No mother's arms. No siren's wail. Only time. And waiting. But in that darkness, where most creatures give in to panic or pass out from fear, Argos stayed awake, eyes open, ears tilted, a broken dog with broken hips and a soldier's mind. He didn't sleep. Not yet. Because his mission wasn't over. Not until the girl was warm again. Not until morning came. Not until she was found alive. The tunnel trembled. It wasn't the earth. It was the water, surging again, angry, hungry, unforgiving. Argos lifted his head. He felt it before it came. That shift in pressure, that deep growl in the marrow of the storm. Something inside him, ancient and trained, knew another surge was coming. Beside him, Emma stirred, then moaned softly. She was cold, lips pale, fingers twitching. He nudged her gently, once, then twice. But this time, she didn't answer. The rush came like a beast with no eyes, blind and brutal. The water roared through the narrow pipe, slamming against walls, licking at their feet, rising with no permission. Emma's body jerked, not from will but force. Her head struck the concrete, a sickening thud, and she went limp. Argos barked, loud, sharp. No answer. His instincts kicked in, not panic, protocol. He stepped over her, shielding, then leaned down, mouth open, and clamped his teeth just beneath her collar, not tearing, securing, the way he once dragged wounded officers from fire lines. The way he'd been trained to pull, not choke. Grip, not break. With one final groan, he pulled her onto his shoulders and braced. Step. Slide. Claw. The incline was slick. Mud sucked at his paws. His hips trembled. Pain flared up his spine like a live wire. But he moved, inch by inch, groaning, growling, a sound not of threat, but of refusal. Refusal to quit, refusal to fail, refusal to let this child go under, forgotten in a flood the town would call an accident. His legs gave once. Just near the tunnel lip, he fell hard, chest slamming into jagged concrete. Blood smeared his underbelly. One tooth cracked, but his grip held. He didn't let go. And then, with a final broken lurch, he dragged her clear. The light outside was gray and trembling. The rain had eased just enough to let bystanders gather at the edge of the floodplain, near the retention wall. 12 people, maybe more. Some in uniform, some in panic, some just watching. Margaret Langford was there, coat-soaked, umbrella snapped, mouth open mid-rant about disease and liability. Sheriff Melvin had his boots in the water already, but none of them moved. Not when they saw. Out of the dark hole, like something out of an old war movie, came a creature no one recognized. Not at first. A German shepherd, muzzle red, body shaking, dragging a lifeless child in its jaws, gently, as if the girl were made of breath. Its eyes weren't wild. They were fixed, focused, purposeful. The dog didn't bark, didn't snarl, just stepped into the open, chest heaving, and placed Emma on the wet grass. Gasps broke like glass. Clara screamed. Sheriff Melvin's radio dropped from his belt. Margaret took one step back, mouth twisted in something between horror and disbelief. "She's bleeding!" someone shouted. "Is she alive?" But no one moved to touch the dog. Not yet. Argos stood over Emma, legs trembling. Then, as if knowing his work was done, he lowered himself beside her, nose touching her temple, ears back. And there, in front of an entire town too stunned to speak, he closed his eyes. It was Deputy Ruiz who knelt first. She checked the girl's pulse. "Alive!" she called out, voice cracking. Then her hands stilled. She looked at the dog, at the blood, at the way it had stained his fur, his face, his paws but not his teeth. And she said, softly, barely above the wind, "He carried her, that's all." But the damage was already blooming. Phones were out, pictures taken, words whispered, "Look at the blood." "That stray came out of the tunnel." "Is that the girl? Oh my God." Sheriff Melvin raised a hand. "Someone get animal control." Argos didn't lift his head, didn't run, didn't resist. He simply lay there, beside the girl, as if he knew what came next. The sirens came late. Too late to witness the rescue, too late to feel the breathless silence that followed it, but not too late to bring judgment. Blue and red lights carved through the mist. 2 animal control units screeched to a halt near the drainage field, tires sinking slightly into the mud. The doors flew open, and Margaret Langford was already shouting. "There!" she shrieked, pointing with a shaking hand. "There! That's the dog!" A German shepherd lay curled beside the unconscious child, soaked, trembling, stained in red and earth. But his posture was not aggressive. His ears were low, his body still, his breathing labored. Margaret didn't care. "He's dangerous. I saw him drag her out like prey." "No," Deputy Carla Ruiz whispered, rising from where she'd just checked the girl's pulse. "He saved her." But the old woman's voice thundered louder. "Look at the blood! Look at his mouth! That beast attacked her! What are you all waiting for?" Sheriff Melvin stepped forward, boots sinking in muck, hand resting near his holster. His gaze flicked from Emma, pale but breathing, to the dog now slowly rising on unsteady legs. Blood still marked Argos's muzzle, not from her, but from himself. No one could see that. They only saw red. "Call for a tranquilizer," Melvin muttered into his radio. "Sheriff," Carla interjected, but he raised one hand, eyes never leaving the dog. "Standard protocol." Argos stood now, not tall, not proud, just standing. The girl he saved was breathing. The town he once served was silent. He looked left. A dart gun being loaded, he looked right. Margaret holding back a group of onlookers like a prosecutor at a hanging. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply took one step back, then another, as if saying, "I understand. You don't know me. You never really did." Jonas Hale watched from behind the crowd, jaw clenched. His cane gripped so tightly the wood trembled. This couldn't be happening. Not after the howl. Not after the tunnel. Not after what that dog just did. But it was happening. Exactly like war taught him things do. Quickly, blindly, without enough truth. "Don't let him get away," Margaret shouted as Argos turned toward the edge of the tree line. 2 control officers advanced, nets in hand, but then, just before they lunged, Argos moved, not fast, not frantic, just precise. He turned, dipped beneath a sagging piece of fence, and vanished into the brush. Gone. No bark, no protest, only silence. The same kind that comes after betrayal. "Get me a perimeter," Melvin snapped. "Don't shoot, just find him." But they wouldn't. Not that night. Maybe not ever. Because Argos, badge K99, once a hero, understood what it meant to be judged by a world that never heard the full story. Carla walked over to Margaret. "You didn't see the rescue. He pulled her out." Margaret scoffed. "So he's clever. So was the fox that killed my hens." "You're wrong." "I'm careful," Margaret snapped, turning. "And don't think I'm the only one." In the distance, Clara arrived, still in scrubs, shoes soaked through, and collapsed to her knees beside her daughter. She never even saw the dog leave. Only the shadow of where he had been, the warmth in the mud, and a single torn collar thread that wasn't Emma's. And far beyond the fields and lights and judgment, Argos limped through the forest, alone again. Not by accident, but by verdict. He had done his job and been condemned for it. By morning, Ravenhill no longer whispered, it gossiped. The storm had passed, but something murkier flooded in its place, thicker than rainwater, harder to clean. Suspicion. At the town clinic, Clara Blake stood in a daze outside Emma's room, hands shaking as she cradled her daughter's damp clothes in a hospital-issued plastic bag. There was dried mud on the sleeves, a faint smear of something darker near the collar. "She's stable," the nurse had said. "Concussion, mild hypothermia, but she's lucky, real lucky." Clara could only nod, but her voice remained somewhere else, stuck in the drain where her daughter had almost vanished. "Who found her?" she'd asked. That's when things got strange. "An animal," the nurse replied. "Dog, apparently." Clara blinked. "A dog?" The nurse hesitated, glancing at the file. "The responders said he pulled her from a tunnel, held her up, got her out." Clara's heart thudded. "But how? Whose dog?" "No one knows. People are saying it was that stray everyone's seen near the creek, the one with the limp." Clara tried to process it. "So, he saved her?" But the nurse's face tightened. "Depends who you ask." Later that afternoon, the town square filled, not with celebration, but conflict. Margaret Langford was already there, flanked by 2 other council elders and an armful of papers. She stood on the gazebo steps like a preacher at a fire and brimstone sermon. "I saw the beast," she cried. "I watched it emerge from that drain with its jaws clamped on the girl's throat." "It was her collar," someone shouted, but Margaret pressed on. "He was covered in blood, foam at the mouth. You want to call that a rescue?" Her voice cracked with fury and age and something deeper, fear disguised as certainty. Jonas Hale stood near the back, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. He listened and clenched his jaw. Across the square, rumors ran like cracks through glass. "It growled at my nephew last week. I heard it broke through a fence on Larkspur Lane. Emma hasn't even woken up. How do we really know what happened? He had blood on him, didn't he? They're saying the sheriff let him go." Someone muttered, "We should put it down before someone else gets hurt." Jonas stepped forward at that. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut clean. "You weren't there." Heads turned. "The girl was unconscious. He brought her back. He didn't bite. He braced. He waited. I saw him." Margaret spun toward him. "And who are you to speak for this town?" Jonas met her stare. "I served. I worked with canines. I know a working dog's instincts when I see them." "Then maybe your instincts are broken too," she snapped. A few murmurs. One man chuckled nervously, but Jonas didn't flinch. "That dog's name is Argos, and he wasn't attacking. He was protecting. What you saw wasn't violence. It was exhaustion." Margaret scoffed. "And the blood?" Jonas replied quietly. "His own." Clara arrived just as the tension rippled. She hadn't come to speak. She came to listen. But when she heard what was being said, her hands began to tremble again. "Wait," she interrupted, voice shaking. "You're talking about the dog who saved my daughter?" The crowd turned. No one responded. "He saved her. That's what I was told." Margaret stepped down, slow, deliberate. Or maybe he dragged her into that tunnel himself. Maybe he meant harm and panicked when people arrived. "That's not what happened," Jonas said. But doubt had already found purchase. Someone in the crowd muttered, "Who really knows?" And with that, the council called for an emergency session. A vote. Not on charges, not on evidence, on perception. That evening, the town notice board bore the printed words, "Emergency Council Hearing, tomorrow at 3 p.m. Topic: Public Safety, Dangerous Animal Threat. Subject: Unclaimed German Shepherd, a.k.a. Argos." Below it, someone had scrawled in pencil, "Hero, not threat." Someone else crossed it out. Inside his cabin, Jonas loaded logs into the fireplace. His hands were shaking, not from the cold. He stared at the crackling flame, his cane leaning against the armchair. The last time he'd watched public opinion turn against someone undeserved was in uniform. It hadn't ended well. Outside the window, the wind picked up. Somewhere out there, Argos was alone again. Not because he failed, but because truth had lost the vote. The beeping was soft, reassuring, like the distant ticking of a heart trying to remember its rhythm. Light streamed through the half-drawn blinds of room 204 in Ravenhill Community Hospital, casting pale golden stripes across the white sheets. The storm had passed, but its remnants lingered in soaked lawns, bent tree limbs, and in Clara Blake's eyes. She hadn't slept. One hand clutched the hospital blanket near her daughter's feet. The other rested on Emma's tiny wrist, two fingers feeling the faint, steady pulse. She had been warned. Concussions were tricky. Kids sometimes stayed quiet for days. The body healed slower when the soul had been scared. But Clara didn't believe in just science anymore. Not after what she'd heard. Not after what she'd seen. The door opened with a soft click. Dr. Avani stepped in, clipboard in hand, her expression measured, hopeful but guarded. "She's stable," the doctor whispered. "No fever. Blood pressure's normal. You can talk to her now if she wakes." If. That word stabbed deeper than most truths. Clara gave a tight nod. At 9:03 a.m., Emma stirred. It wasn't dramatic. No gasping, no sudden sitting up. Just a slow twitch of fingers, a soft wrinkle of her brow. Her lips moved soundlessly. Clara leaned in. "Sweetheart," she whispered, voice cracking. "Can you hear Mommy?" A pause, then a tiny breath, a dry swallow, and then, barely above a whisper, "He saved me." Clara blinked. "What did you say, baby?" Emma turned her head slightly. Her voice, still thready, came again, more firm this time. "He saved me, Mommy." Clara's throat caught. "The dog?" Emma nodded. "The one by the drain?" Clara pressed gently, fighting tears. "No," Emma whispered. "My dog." Within the hour, the hospital allowed a social worker to document the child's statement. Jonas came, standing quietly near the doorway, hat in hand. Emma recognized him, smiled. "You saw him too," she said. Jonas knelt, painfully, his knee clicking. "I did." The social worker recorded. "Do you remember anything else, Emma?" the woman asked. The girl's eyes lit up, and in that moment, some fragment of storm fear fell away. "He let me climb on him. When the water was fast, I held his fur." She paused. "And when I fell, he bit my shirt and pulled me. I was cold and scared, but he didn't leave." "Did he hurt you?" Emma frowned as if offended. "He's super dog. Super dogs don't bite kids." Jonas smiled at that. Clara laughed through her tears. "What do you want to call him?" the social worker asked gently, pen ready. Emma didn't hesitate. "Hero." Later that day, a nurse pinned Emma's drawing on the corkboard above her bed. Crayons on printer paper, rough, smudged, a big-eared German shepherd with a red cape. A girl in rain boots beside him holding his tail. Her face was smiling. At the bottom, in shaky block letters, "My hero saved me." Word traveled faster than facts. At the town diner, someone scoffed. "Kids don't remember trauma right." At the firehouse, a rookie mumbled, "Could have been adrenaline or coincidence. Doesn't mean the dog's safe." At Councilwoman Langford's house, the drawing was printed from a Facebook post and laid on the kitchen counter like a challenge. She didn't touch it. But at Jonas Hale's porch, it was different. He sat on the steps that night, the drawing tucked in his coat pocket. The town wasn't listening. Not yet. But one voice had cut through the noise. A child's voice, clear, certain. The kind of voice people used to trust before fear learned how to vote louder. Out past the edge of Ravenhill, somewhere near the tree line, a dog slept beneath a half-collapsed shed. His body ached. One paw was bandaged with scraps of denim he hadn't eaten, but his ears still turned toward the wind, toward a whisper he thought he imagined. Hero. He didn't know the word, but something in it felt like the name he had lost, and the promise he'd never stopped keeping. The woods outside Ravenhill didn't look like much to most. Scrub oak, briars, coyote tracks that led nowhere, a rusted-out swing set that had surrendered to moss. But Jonas Hale knew how to read land. His limp was heavier today, but he didn't complain. He moved the way soldiers moved when they were following something that mattered. Quiet, deliberate, one boot at a time through the fallen leaves. It had been 2 nights since the flood, since the dog vanished, since the girl whispered, "He saved me." Jonas believed her, not just because she was a child, but because he had seen it in her eyes, that soft, trembling truth survivors carry when they know they weren't alone. And he'd seen it in the dog, too. Not just muscle and reaction, but instinct, restraint, choice. That wasn't a stray. Jonas knew the difference. He stepped over a log and paused. To the untrained eye, it was nothing, just damp ground, pressed down weeds, but Jonas knelt, resting a hand on his cane. "A perimeter," he muttered. 3 scuffed patches in the dirt, evenly spaced. Not aimless like a coyote circling prey, intentional, defensive. He scanned the area again. To his left, crushed leaves under a bramble. To his right, a torn grocery bag caught on a twig, its handles knotted as if someone or something, had carried it in its teeth. He followed the trail downhill, breath caught between disbelief and memory. And then he saw it. A patch of blue cloth tucked beneath a wild bush. He crouched and tugged gently. A blanket. Old, faded, stiff from dew, but unmistakably folded, not pawed at, not shredded, placed. At the center, a small pile of half-eaten food. Dried jerky, crusted bread, and what looked like a slice of cheese wrapped in wax paper. Jonas sat back on his heel, stared. This wasn't scavenging, it was rationing, a soldier's instinct. "Still watching," Jonas murmured to the woods. "Still on duty." He moved another 15 yards, following faint disturbances, grass bent just so, a streak of mud up the side of a low boulder, claw marks near the edge of a creek bed. Then he saw it. A single paw print, deep, precise, pressed into wet soil like a signature. Jonas squatted beside it, hand hovering. "Front left," he muttered. "Weight bearing." Right leg still favoring. He closed his eyes, letting the silence press in, listening. Birds chirped in the distance. Water trickled somewhere downhill. And then, nothing. No scurry of panic, no growl, just quiet, as if something was watching him, as if someone already knew he was there. Jonas reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object, a chewed tennis ball. He'd found it at the base of Emma's porch the night before, wedged beneath the steps. He placed it gently beside the folded blanket and stood up. No calls, no whistles, just presence, just respect. "Your girl's okay," he said into the trees. "She asked about you." A breeze stirred the branches. Jonas adjusted his cane and turned back the way he came. "He's not lost," he murmured to no one. "He's waiting." Back in town, no one wanted to listen. The council was preparing its vote. The posters still read, "Dog danger. Emergency meeting Monday." But Jonas had seen enough. The dog wasn't running wild. He was pulling guard duty in exile. Jonas had worn that kind of silence before, and he knew exactly what it meant. That night, he sat by the fireplace, scribbling notes into an old journal, mapping the trail, the behavior, the intent. His pen paused. Then, across the page, in all caps, "Not astray. Not done yet. Just out of uniform." He closed the notebook slowly and whispered into the embers, "Tomorrow, we bring him home." It was just past dawn when Jonas knocked on the back door of the sheriff's station, a folded slip of paper in his hand and a purpose in his bones. Deputy Carla Ruiz answered, still nursing her first cup of coffee. She raised an eyebrow. "You don't usually show up before sunrise?" Jonas didn't waste time. "I need a scanner, and your word that this stays off the record at least for now." Carla studied him. The lines around his eyes were tighter today. His hands didn't shake from age. They trembled from urgency. She stepped aside. "You buying me breakfast after this?" "Only if it comes with a side of truth." The ride out to the edge of Ravenhill was silent. The truck bumped along the rutted trail that cut through the forest. Jonas had marked the site. 3 rocks, stacked like a soldier's cairn, just past the fallen pine. Carla parked. The silence wrapped around them, thick and waiting. "Jonas," she said carefully, "you sure it's safe?" "I'm not here because it's safe," he replied. "I'm here because he didn't run far." Carla reached for the microchip scanner, slinging it over her shoulder like a cross between a weapon and a lifeline. "Let's go meet your ghost." The woods were still, but not empty. Carla noticed it first. The scent in the air, not rot, not wilderness, something alive, animal, but clean, kept. Jonas motioned for her to slow as they approached the spot near the creek bed. And there he was, Argos, lying beside the folded blanket, half curled. His coat still matted, but his ears pricked. His body didn't flinch, just the eyes, alert, watching, calculating. He didn't growl. He didn't run. He waited. Carla froze. "That's him?" Jonas nodded once. "That's not a stray. That's a soldier." They approached carefully, letting him watch. Jonas knelt first, holding out a hand, palm flat, slow breath. "Easy, hero." Carla clicked the scanner on. It buzzed softly as she lowered it near the dog's shoulder. Argos tensed, then held still, as if recognizing the ritual. Then, beep, sharp, clear, absolute. Carla stared at the screen. then blinked, then said the words that would change everything. K99, Dallas PD. Jonas exhaled, like something unspoken had finally stepped out of the shadows. Carla looked at him. You knew? Suspected. She glanced back at the dog. But this confirms it. Jonas nodded. Now, it's not just a dog in the woods. It's an officer, a forgotten one. She knelt beside him, reading off the chip data. Last registered handler, Captain Gabriel Knox, assigned unit narcotics. Final status, marked retired. No record of placement, no transfer confirmation. Jonas's voice dropped. He was dumped. Carla shook her head. This doesn't happen. There are protocols. And sometimes, Jonas cut in, protocols are paperwork. And paperwork gets lost when nobody's watching. Argo shifted, placing his chin against the damp earth. Carla's voice softened. He stayed near the town, near her. Jonas nodded. Still on duty. They sat in silence for a long moment, the kind that says more than speaking ever could. Then Jonas rose. We need to bring this back. The council, the mayor, they need to know who they're voting on. Not a wild animal, a decorated officer. Carla stood beside him. You think they'll care? I think a little girl's already told them the truth. Now we give them proof. She looked down at Argos again. He doesn't know he was forgotten, does he? Jonas's reply was quiet, almost reverent. No, he only knows he wasn't finished. As they turned to go, Argos stood. No bark, no whine, just a quiet step forward, then another. And then, like a shadow stepping into sunlight, he walked beside Jonas, not behind, not ahead, beside. Carla didn't say a word, but the scanner still hung from her shoulder, beeping softly every time it passed near his heart. As if even the machine knew. He'd never stopped being a hero. The call came just after 4 p.m. Static crackled as the receptionist from Dallas PD's K9 retirement office fumbled through words Jonas had already guessed. Sir, we do have a record on file for K99, Argos. He was officially listed as placed with a veteran family 4 months after his injury. Jonas's grip tightened on the receiver. Which family? A pause, more clicking. We don't have that detail. It just says, placement completed. No signature on the release, no follow-up. I'm sorry. He inhaled slowly. And the handler? Captain Gabriel Knox is no longer in the department. Retired 2 years ago, out of state. We've tried contacting him. No reply. Jonas's voice came out even. Too even. Do you have any report of Argos going missing? No, sir. No missing file. We assumed he was with the family. Jonas stared at the floor, a vein pulsing behind his jaw. Then why did he almost drown in a drainpipe 6 counties away? The line was silent. Then came the quiet answer, bland, bureaucratic, and heavier than any weapon Jonas had ever carried. Could have been an administrative error. He hung up without saying goodbye. The word rang in his mind like a taunt. Error. They didn't even notice when a decorated K9 vanished. No protocol breach, no alert, no officer report, just a typo in a file no one checked. Jonas sat at his dining table, surrounded by pages. Some were Argos's, some were his own, old military records, Scans of articles from the War Dog archives, blurry photos from a Dallas ceremony 5 years ago, a younger Argos, lean and proud, flanked by 2 officers with medals pinned high. He'd taken debris to the spine, pulling a narcotics agent out of a collapsing meth lab. That should have earned him a monument. Instead, they gave him a label: retired. And then, nothing. Outside, the wind picked up. It rushed through the trees like the ghosts of dogs no one had ever mourned. Jonas stood, walked to the backyard, and lit the fire pit. One by one, he fed the copies in. First, the placement form, unsigned. Then the so-called discharge papers, barely 2 lines of text. Then the memo from a lieutenant he didn't know, stating Argos was deemed unsuitable for future use. That line burned the longest. Carla Ruiz arrived just before sundown, catching him as the last paper turned to ash. "Heard back from Dallas?" she asked. Jonas didn't look at her. "They called it an error." Carla's jaw tightened. "That what they're calling abandonment now?" He nodded once, slow. A clerical oversight, 4 years of silence. No one noticed he was gone. She stepped beside him. The flames flickered low now, casting long shadows. "You okay?" "No." Silence. Then he added, "But I'm done letting that dog be treated like garbage." She looked over. "What are you going to do?" He didn't blink. "Tell the town. Show them what a hero looks like when no one's watching." The fire died to embers. Jonas stood with his back straight, like a man who'd just buried more than files. "He deserved more," he said. And in that simple sentence was the grief of every forgotten soul, every loyal companion discarded when they were no longer useful. Not just Argos, but all of them, the 4-legged soldiers, the quiet sentinels, the ones who never got a funeral. Carla placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'll help." He nodded, once. "Then let's start with the truth." The Ravenhill Council chamber had never seen this many people on a Tuesday morning. The air was thick with whispers, not the idle kind, but those charged with opinion, judgment, and fear. Locals filled every wooden bench. Reporters hovered near the back. A camera from Channel 3 blinked its red eye near the door. And in the very front row, a child sat holding a dog's ear gently between her fingers. Emma, pale but healing. Argos, silent, still, breathing slow. And behind them, a town holding its breath. Mayor Linden adjusted his tie twice, though it didn't need adjusting. He tapped the gavel gently. "This hearing is called to order to review the emergency motion presented by Councilwoman Margaret Langford. The motion concerns the containment and removal of an unregistered canine involved in a flood incident 2 weeks ago." Margaret stood. She didn't need notes. "This is simple," she began, voice steady but sharp. 20 signatures from concerned citizens. A blood-covered dog was found with a child in a storm drain. That dog, regardless of whatever emotional story some want to spin, is untagged, unlicensed, and unpredictable. He growled at a bystander. He disappeared instead of submitting. We have no guarantee he won't do it again. I'm calling for immediate removal and euthanization for public safety." A murmur swept the room like wind through dry grass. Emma flinched. Argos didn't. Jonas Hale rose slowly, not with flourish but with weight. He didn't stand behind a podium, just placed a hand on the bench near Emma and faced the room like he'd faced generals in battlefields. "You all know me," he said simply. "I served 2 tours. I buried brothers. I've worked with dogs that didn't just sniff out bombs. They carried their handlers out of burning wrecks." He turned to Argos. This dog didn't run because he's guilty. He ran because someone in his past taught him that trust gets you hurt. A beat of silence. Argos, Jonas said, pointing calmly, is not a stray. He's not feral. He's not dangerous. He held up a printed scan. He's K-99, Dallas Police Department, Narcotics Division, Medal of Valor recipient. His handler filed a placement form and never checked on him again. That's not this dog's failure. That's ours. He let the words settle, then added, he saved that girl. Emma looked up. He's my hero. Frank Donnelly, the retired postal worker who everyone knew by his bright suspenders and louder opinions, stood next. Councilwoman Langford says he growled. You'd growl too if you were dragged from a storm, covered in blood that wasn't yours, and called a monster. That dog stayed still in a flood so a little girl could breathe. How many of us would have done the same? Laughter broke out, nervous, sympathetic. Margaret scoffed. He's unpredictable, Frank pointed. So's lightning. But it can still save your life. Sheriff Melvin, seated beside the mayor, leaned forward at last. His voice was low, even. I've reviewed the body cam footage. The dog didn't bite. He didn't lunge. He stood between Emma and anyone who got too close. That's not aggression. That's protection. Mayor Linden rubbed his temple. Enough, he muttered. Then louder, we'll move to discussion. But it was already happening. Half the room whispered one name, hero. The other half hissed, danger. As voices rose, Argos did not flinch. Emma leaned closer and whispered something into his ear. No one heard what she said. But the dog's tail twitched once, not wagging, not happy, just present, like a soldier acknowledging a comrade's last words. Outside, the storm clouds gathered again. Inside, a vote was coming, and everyone, even the dog, could feel the town split down its spine. The room hadn't been this quiet all morning. Even Margaret Langford, arms folded and lips pressed tight, said nothing. Every head turned toward the little girl seated beside the dog some still called a threat. She sat on the cushioned bench with her knees together, and her voice caught somewhere between memory and courage. Emma, the mayor said gently, you said you wanted to speak. Are you sure? The girl nodded. She was 7, but in that moment, with stormlight slanting through the council chamber windows, casting gold across her tangled hair and bandaged arm, she looked older than all of them. Jonas helped her down from the bench. She stood at the center of the room, holding something close to her chest, a single sheet of crayon-covered paper, smudged at the corners, folded like a secret. My name is Emma. The microphone whined a little. She flinched, then found her voice again. I used to race leaf boats in the drain behind our yard. Mommy works a lot, and I get lonely sometimes. A pause. I saw him before the flood. He never barked, never chased me. I gave him part of my sandwich. He sat real still, like he didn't want to scare me. She glanced toward Argos. I called him Superdog. Somewhere in the audience, someone sniffled. Emma unfolded the drawing. It was simple. Crude lines. A large dog with pointed ears and kind eyes. A red cape fluttering behind him. A tiny stick-figure girl holding his paw. Above them, 3 words written in awkward block letters. My hero dog. She held it up. No one spoke. The courtroom's cold fluorescent light softened. Or maybe it was just the way people started seeing. When the water came, Emma continued, I slipped. It was dark, really dark. I was scared. She touched her temple near the bandage. I hit my head. I think I stopped screaming. Her lower lip trembled. And then I felt him. She pointed. He was under me. His fur was wet, but warm. He let me hold on. Emma looked straight at Margaret Langford. He didn't bite me. He didn't drag me. He saved me. The silence afterward wasn't empty. It was full of breath held, of walls cracking, of grown-ups remembering what truth sounds like when it comes from someone too young to lie. Councilman Patel cleared his throat, his voice unexpectedly hoarse. Do you remember what happened when you got out of the tunnel? Emma nodded. Everyone looked scared. Some yelled. I tried to tell them, but they didn't listen. She reached over, placed her small hand on Argos's head. But he didn't run from me. Only from them. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I think he thought they'd hurt him. Argos didn't move, didn't blink, but his tail twitched. Once, soft as a sigh. Frank Donnelly rose again from the back. You hear that? He called out. We talk about safety, about risk, but we forget. This little girl already made her choice. She trusts him, and she's the one who nearly died. Someone clapped, then another. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the fear like a match to fog. Margaret tried to regain control. This is highly irregular. We can't base policy on crayon drawings. Mayor Linden raised a hand. Maybe not, he said quietly. But we can base it on clarity. And for the first time today, I think we've actually heard it. Emma turned, walking back toward the bench. Jonas reached down, steadying her. She leaned into him for just a second, then sat beside Argos again, resting against his ribs. The drawing remained on the stand, fluttering slightly in the draft of the chamber vent. And in those lines, not perfectly drawn, not professionally rendered, was something the cameras and signatures and formal words had failed to give. Truth. Undeniable. Undeniably human. The double doors creaked open, not dramatically. Just enough for the light from the hallway to spill into the council chambers, catching every face already turned toward the front. But it wasn't the light that made Argos stir. It was the boots, measured steps, military weight, a cadence only one other in the room could feel in their bones. Argos raised his head slowly, his ears perked, his breath caught. The man who stepped in wore no badge now, just a simple gray shirt, clean slacks, and an old pair of dog tags glinting softly under his collar. Captain Gabriel Knox. Whispers started. The mayor leaned toward the clerk. Is that? Jonas stood, spine rigid, every instinct telling him this wasn't just another witness. Knox kept walking, not to the podium, not to the mayor's bench, but straight to Argos. He knelt, slowly, and Argos did something no one had seen all week. He whined, just once, low, deep, not from the throat, but from memory. Then, without hesitation, he leaned forward and pressed his muzzle into the man's chest. Gasps rippled across the room. Knox whispered something no one could hear. But whatever it was, Argos responded by sitting tall and still, like a soldier returned to parade rest. Then Knox stood and turned to face the room. I'm Captain Gabriel Knox, retired Dallas PD K-9 Division, he said. Badge number 31978. I was Argos's final handler. Silence. Stillness. He's not a stray, Knox continued. He's not a threat. He's a soldier, and like too many of us, he was discarded the second he was injured." The mayor spoke cautiously. "Captain, you weren't on the initial contact list. How did you—" "I wasn't contacted at all," Knox replied. "I was told Argos was retired to a family. I found out 2 nights ago, by accident, from a former colleague who recognized the K99 tag in a news clip." He looked down at Argos. "That tag was ours. We earned it together." Margaret stood. "Even if that's true, he saved 3 officers during a fentanyl raid," Knox cut in. His voice didn't raise. It didn't need to. "He took a collapse to the spine to push me out of the blast zone. That scar on his hip, it's from falling concrete. He never whimpered, never stopped scanning, even when they tranquilized him." He turned to the room. "And now I hear he saved a child?" Clara nodded, tears in her eyes. Knox faced Emma. "Is that true, ma'am?" Emma grinned. "He's my superhero." Knox exhaled, a sound like history leaving the lungs. "Then let me say this clear. If anyone in this town believes Argos is dangerous, I offer myself as his temporary guardian." He held up a file. "I've filed emergency paperwork with Dallas PD to reinstate his protected status as a retired officer. No euthanasia, no pound, no stray branding." He paused. "But that's not enough. This dog isn't meant for a cage. He's meant for connection." Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned toward Clara and Jonas. "Which is why I propose this: shared guardianship between Miss Clara's family and Mr. Hale." A wave moved through the crowd. Shared guardianship. The mayor blinked. "That's unconventional." "But legal," Knox said. "Under subsection 17B for service animal reassignment. 1 home for healing, 1 for purpose, 1 dog who still matters." He looked at Argos again. "He saved my life once. Looks like he's done it again." Argos shifted slightly. His tail brushed Emma's foot. She smiled, curled her fingers into his fur, and didn't let go. Frank Donnelly stood from the back. "You heard the girl. You heard the Marine. Hell, you saw the dog. What more do we need?" A murmur of agreement. Councilman Patel raised his hand. "Mayor Linden, I motion to vote on shared guardianship and to recognize Argos as a retired service dog with full honors." Seconded. Carried. The mayor turned, hand already on the gavel, but before he brought it down, he looked at Argos one last time. "I don't know what you remember, boy," he said quietly, "but I hope you know this town is going to remember you." Then, bang! The council chamber, once divided by whispers and accusation, now held its breath. Rain tapped against the high windows of Ravenhill Town Hall, soft and rhythmic, a reminder of the storm that had started all this. But inside, it was a different kind of weather, still, heavy, waiting to break. At the front, Mayor Linden adjusted his glasses and looked over the stack of statements again. He didn't need to. He had them memorized. But perhaps rereading was easier than looking into the eyes of a child who had nearly drowned, and the dog who had saved her. To his left sat Councilwoman Margaret Langford, hands folded tight, lips pursed. To his right, Frank Donnelly leaned back in his chair with a defiant calm. Between them, Patel adjusted his tie. Nervous, but ready. Deputy Ruiz stood along the wall, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised. Clara held Emma's hand in the second row, and beside them, Argos. No collar, no muzzle, just a faded red bandana around his neck, knotted loosely. Emma's idea. It wasn't standard, but nothing about him ever had been. "Final item on the agenda," Mayor Linden said. "Vote on Motion 42A to determine whether the animal formerly known as K-99, now called Hero, is deemed a danger to the public." He looked up. "This will also determine if he may remain in Ravenhill under shared guardianship between Mr. Jonas Hale and Ms. Clara Morrison." The room was still. No coughing, no phones. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. The mayor glanced to Margaret. "Councilwoman Langford?" She barely moved. "Against. One attack, real or perceived, is enough." Frank spoke next. "In favor." "That wasn't an attack. That was a rescue." Patel cleared his throat. "In favor." All eyes turned back to the mayor. His hand hovered over the wooden gavel. He looked at Emma. She didn't speak. She just nodded, brave and quiet. He turned to Hero and paused. The dog met his gaze, not as a pet, not even as an animal, but as something in between, a witness, a protector, a soul that had already earned his vote. "In favor." Bang! The sound of the gavel echoed like a cannon. 3-1. Approved. Emma didn't scream. She gasped, then turned to her mother and wrapped her arms around her neck. Clara kissed her forehead, eyes damp. Jonas stood, not with a grin, but with a kind of quiet dignity only men who've lost too much know how to carry. He exhaled through his nose and sat down again, one hand gently resting on his cane. His knuckles were white, not from fear anymore, but release. Hero blinked slowly, as if trying to read the room. Then Emma knelt beside him, gently touched his ear, and whispered something no one could hear. He wagged his tail just once, and that was enough. Mayor Linden leaned into the mic again. "Let the minutes reflect. The town of Ravenhill does not classify this animal as a public threat. Hero will remain under alternating supervision by Mr. Hale and Ms. Morrison, per the guardianship agreement. He will also be granted protected status as a retired law enforcement canine under Clause 7B. He paused. "And, on a personal note, I hope one day this town can learn from the grace that both this animal and this child have shown us." The meeting adjourned. People began rising, some clapping, some uncertain, but the tension had shifted. No longer blame, now the beginning of belief. Outside, the sun pierced through thinning clouds. Water dripped from the courthouse gutters, puddling near the steps. Emma ran down them with Hero at her side, boots splashing, laughter echoing off the brick. Clara followed, hand in hand with Jonas, who moved slow but steady. When they reached the sidewalk, Emma crouched and looked Hero in the eye again. "You're safe now," she whispered, "and we're safe because of you." Hero tilted his head, then pressed his nose gently to her forehead. Jonas watched them. His voice, rough and raspy, finally broke the silence. "I gave one oath a long time ago," he said. "To serve and protect." He looked at Hero. "I never thought I'd take it again. Because of a dog." Clara smiled faintly. "Second oaths are the ones we choose." And that made him smile too. As the last of the townspeople trickled away and the courthouse doors closed behind them, Hero sat on the edge of the pavement. He looked east, where the sky had cleared, then west, where the rain still lingered, like someone who knew both worlds, but now, finally, had a place to stand between them. The gavel had fallen. The chamber had cleared. But not all storms leave behind silence. In the days that followed the vote, Ravenhill wore a kind of uneasy calm, like a house after an argument, windows intact but something unsettled in the walls. Margaret Langford didn't speak to the press. She didn't appear at the bakery like she usually did on Tuesday mornings. Her porch lights stayed off. The "Rehome the Dog" petition hung limp on the bulletin board at City Hall, the ink slightly smeared from someone's rain-damp hand. 20 names, most scribbled, none bold enough to sign again since the vote. But Margaret held her ground, or tried to. She still crossed the street when she saw Hero padding beside Jonas, still flinched at the sound of claws on concrete, still carried that weight in her shoulders that had less to do with logic and more to do with fear hardened into habit. Jonas didn't go looking for her, not at first, but on the third day after the ruling, after watching Hero nap beneath Emma's feet while she read aloud in the yard, after watching Clara look at the dog with the kind of gratitude that didn't need words, Jonas decided, some things don't mend unless someone picks up the thread. He walked to Margaret's house just before dusk, leaning a little heavier on his cane than usual. Hero stayed behind. Some truths had to be spoken without witnesses. The house was modest, paint chipped, shutters worn, but the hedges were always trimmed sharp, a habit of control in a world that didn't offer much. Jonas knocked once. The door didn't open. He waited, then knocked again. Not louder, just longer. After a pause, it creaked open halfway. Margaret stood in the gap, sweater draped over one shoulder, face drawn tight. "I don't want trouble," she said flatly. "Neither do I," Jonas replied. "Just conversation." Silence. Then, reluctantly, she stepped back. He entered, taking a seat in the old armchair near the window, the cushion sighing beneath him. The smell of peppermint and dust lingered in the air, like a room that had known more guests in a different time. Margaret didn't sit. She stood at the far end of the living room near a framed photograph of her late husband in uniform. Vietnam, Jonas guessed. There was weight in that stance, the kind that came from decades of holding things in. Jonas spoke first. "I know what fear feels like," he said. "Woke up with it for years, slept beside it, ate breakfast with it." She said nothing. "I also know the face of discipline, of loyalty, of sacrifice. That dog," he exhaled, letting his voice soften. He stayed with her. When the current pulled, when the mud rose, when no one else even knew she was gone, he stayed. Margaret's fingers clenched around the edge of a table. Blood was on him. "He bit her collar," Jonas replied calmly, "dragged her to higher ground. Held her up with a spine full of scar tissue and lungs full of floodwater. He never let go." She looked away. "Even after you called him a threat," Jonas added gently. "He didn't bark, didn't lash out. He walked away, like a soldier dismissed." Something shifted in her jaw. Stillness, not acceptance, but the beginning of something softer. "You think I don't regret?" she whispered, eyes glossy now. "You think I sleep easy, knowing I might have pushed the town to end him?" Jonas shook his head. "I think you're human, and scared, and maybe that's okay." He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "But fear doesn't excuse forgetting who he is." She turned back to the photo on the mantel, voice quieter. "My husband had a dog in Nam, lost him in an ambush. Said he cried harder for that dog than any man he buried." Jonas looked at her, something flickering in his expression, something like recognition. Margaret finally sank into the chair across from him. "You really believe he's safe? With her? Jonas said, smiling faintly. "He's home." 3 days later, the petition disappeared from the bulletin board. No announcement, no apology. Just gone. Jonas never brought it up again. And Margaret? She still didn't wave when they passed each other on Main Street. But one afternoon, while Emma and Hero played in the field behind the church, Margaret paused on the sidewalk. She didn't call out. She didn't approach, but she stayed long enough to watch. And when Hero glanced up from chasing a ball and met her eyes, he didn't flinch. He just blinked, then turned back to the child. The plaque wasn't large. It didn't gleam like the polished brass of war memorials or shimmer like the chrome on a city trophy. It was modest, a matte slate of tempered glass mounted on a sandstone pillar outside the Ravenhill firehouse. But what it held, what it meant, weighed heavier than any monument in town. The morning it was unveiled, the sky over Ravenhill wore the color of cotton, soft, overcast, still, not stormy, not bright, just hushed, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Children lined the sidewalk with their parents. Firefighters stood in dress blues. Clara held Emma's hand tight. Jonas, cane in one hand, stood just behind them, with Hero sitting tall at his side. No leash, no muzzle, just presence. His coat had grown thicker since the flood. His limp had softened, but the scars along his hindquarters were still there, unhidden, unashamed. The mayor spoke first, clearing his throat against a microphone that squeaked once. "We gather here not just to honor service," he began, "but to remember something many of us forgot." He glanced toward Hero. "That duty doesn't always wear a badge. And sometimes the line between stray and savior is just how closely we're willing to look." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The plaque stood covered by a navy cloth fluttering slightly in the breeze. The mayor stepped back. "Miss Emma Winters, would you do us the honor?" Emma nodded, letting go of her mother's hand. She walked slowly to the front, not nervous, not overwhelmed, just steady. Hero rose, following a pace behind her. She reached for the cloth, paused, then whispered something only he could hear. Hero's ears flicked forward. Then, with both hands, she pulled. The cloth fell, and there, for the first time, Ravenhill saw what memory could look like in glass. K-9 Hero for service beyond duty. August 12th, Ravenhill. Flood rescue. Below the inscription, etched delicately into the bottom corner, was a child's drawing, scanned from colored pencil and preserved forever in the surface. A German shepherd with alert ears, paws planted firm, and a red cape flowing behind. It wasn't perfect. The lines were uneven. One ear was slightly bigger than the other. But the eyes, wide, warm, certain, mirrored the real thing. Someone in the crowd sniffled. Then applause began, not loud but growing, honest, earned. Jonas stepped beside Emma and knelt, ignoring the creak in his knee. He rested one hand on Hero's back, voice low. "You stood when no one else did." Hero didn't move, but his tail thumped once. That night, long after the ceremony, after the photo ops and thank you speeches had faded into memory, Jonas returned to the firehouse alone. He stood in front of the plaque, the street lamp casting a faint golden wash over the glass. He looked at the drawing, the cape, the eyes, then leaned forward and touched the name, Hero. His voice was just a whisper. "You never asked for this. Never needed a name in stone." He paused. "But now you've got one." And for the first time in years, something inside Jonas, something he thought the war had buried, softened. Not erased, just forgiven. Back at the house, Hero curled beside Emma's bed. She slept with one arm slung off the mattress, fingers buried in his fur. Outside, the wind rustled gently through the leaves. No alarms, no sirens, no howls, just quiet. The kind that means you're home. The porch faced east, where the light came in soft and gold. Every morning, Hero, once Argus, lay at the top step, ears twitching to a world finally still. Beside him, Emma rested, tracing the fur behind his ear as they watched the world wake. Jonas appeared after sunrise, cane in hand, a folded military mat under his arm. "Ready, partner?" he asked Hero. The dog stood, no hesitation, no limp. Jonas laid the mat and started drills. "Down!" Hero obeyed. "Stay!" 10 beats passed. "Up!" Hero rose, slower but precise, muscle memory intact. Clara watched from the doorway, mug in hand, not wanting to break the peace. The Marine, the broken dog, the scarred girl, they moved in quiet rhythm. By mid-morning, Jonas wiped his brow. "You've earned it." Emma clapped. "Snack time!" Hero perked up. She brought peanut butter toast and a red ball. Hero caught the ball mid-air, tail sweeping the porch. Clara stepped out. "You're spoiling him." Jonas smiled. "He's earned it." That evening, as the sky faded, Jonas ran his hand down Hero's back. "You saved her. Then you saved me." Hero's tail tapped once, like punctuation. Jonas whispered to the trees, "For the first time in years, I'm not waiting for the next bad thing." Later, Jonas spoke into the dusk. "The first dog I saw save a life was in Helmand. Ava, Belgian Malinois, detected IEDs before our boots touched dirt. She saved us. One day, bad coordinates, whole valley wired. She yanked her handler back. I took his place. She died saving me. No medal, no name on a wall." Hero lifted his head. Jonas looked down. "I never forgave myself." Clara joined him, offering coffee. "I thought I came back with scars," Jonas said. "Turns out I brought ghosts." "He's not one of them," Clara said. "No, he pulls them out." Emma appeared, blanket in hand. "Hero gets cold," she said, wrapping it around him, then climbed into Jonas's lap. He closed his eyes. 3 survivors, 3 second chances. That night, Jonas whispered to Hero, "You're not just a good boy. You're my chance to set it right." Hero rumbled low in his chest. Jonas smiled, just understanding. Every night Emma would pat her bed. "Home," she'd say, and Hero came. No scanning exits, no bracing at creaks, just settled. 2 heartbeats, 1 piece. One night, Clara watched as Emma traced Hero's scar. "He doesn't flinch anymore," Emma whispered. "No more bad dreams." "How do you know?" "Because he just sighs." Hero's posture softened over time. Jonas noted decompression, first step in retiring a working dog. But Hero wasn't just becoming a pet. He was becoming safe. During a storm, Emma woke, slid to the rug and wrapped an arm over Hero. The old dog leaned in, not as protector, but as someone who had found where he belonged. Clara called it the new command. "Home," she'd say at dinner, "and he listens." Jonas nodded. "Because she means it." One afternoon, Hero watched the mail truck, then returned inside. "No one's coming to take him back," Clara said. "He's not going anywhere," Jonas replied. Later, Jonas knelt beside Hero. "You've done your duty, more than anyone asked." He removed the collar's tag, now bearing Emma's drawing. Hero. That night, Emma opened her door. Hero came without needing the word, and when she whispered home, he was already asleep. No twitching paws, no yelps, just peace. The kind of peace earned not by forgetting the past, but by surviving it, and knowing, finally, that survival was enough. The clouds rolled in like a slow gray tide, low and heavy, dragging the light out of Ravenhill. Leaves clung to their branches as if dreading the inevitable. A hush swept through the neighborhood. Children called in early, windows latched, dogs unsettled. Inside the small yellow house on Pinebrook Lane, Clara was rinsing dishes when the alert chimed on her phone. Severe flood warning, flash potential in low-lying areas. Her heart froze. "Emma?" she called out. No answer. She dried her hands on the nearest towel, voice rising. "Emma?" Still nothing. In the hallway, her bedroom door stood open. The bed was made, stuffed animals lined up in perfect military formation. Clara bolted to the backyard, scanning the fence line, the small garden, the corners where shadows liked to settle. The doghouse by the porch was empty. "Hero?" she called. "Emma!" She was running now, barefoot in the grass, voice hoarse. She didn't remember grabbing her coat, or the car keys, or telling the neighbor to call the sheriff. Only the thudding panic, rising in her ears like the sound of rushing water. Jonas had seen the clouds, too. He stood by his window, back brace tightening with every breath. When the knock came, he already knew. "She's missing," Clara choked out. "She's not missing," Jonas said, already pulling on his boots. "She's just where she thinks she's supposed to be." They found her under the Ravenhill gazebo. The same spot where Hero had once crouched, ribs showing through rain-matted fur. The same worn wooden slats, the same puddles forming like forgotten stories. Emma sat cross-legged on the old stone bench, her raincoat half-zipped, peanut butter crackers in a Tupperware beside her. She looked up as they approached, calm, smiling. "I knew Hero would come if I called." Clara collapsed to her knees and wrapped her arms around her daughter. She didn't scold, didn't shout, just held on like the wind might carry her away. Emma giggled. "Mom, you're all wet." Jonas scanned the tree line, the drain paths, the slope of the hill behind the gazebo. The air smelled different now, wetter, more electric. His trained eye noted footprints leading in from the east side, and paw prints beside them. "Let's go," he said gently. "Storm's coming." They walked back slowly, Clara holding Emma's hand in one, the leash looped in the other. Hero padded beside them, eyes alert but calm, posture steady. Emma looked up at Jonas. "Did I do something wrong?" He shook his head. "No, sweetheart. You did something brave." "But Mommy was scared." "She had every right to be," Clara said softly, kneeling again so she was eye level. "Because I love you, and because sometimes, even when you know someone is strong, you remember how close you came to losing them." Emma turned toward Hero, who had lain down by her feet, head between his paws. "He wouldn't let me get lost," she said simply. Jonas looked at the girl, then the dog. "No," he whispered. "He wouldn't." Back at the house, they toweled off Hero together, Emma giggling when he shook mid-dry and sprayed droplets across the kitchen. Clara made tea. Jonas stood at the back window, watching the clouds press lower against the mountains. But this time, when thunder rumbled, Hero didn't flinch. He simply got up, walked to Emma's room, and curled into his usual spot. Clara followed Jonas to the porch. "You knew she'd be there," she said. He nodded. "She went where she last felt safest." Clara sighed. "Is that good or bad?" Jonas didn't answer right away. He looked out at the driveway, the wet pavement catching the first stray drops of the evening rain. "Neither," he said finally. "It just means she remembers. And remembering doesn't always mean being afraid. Sometimes it means knowing what to trust." They sat in silence as the rain began, soft at first. Inside, Emma's voice called out, "Hero, home!" And the storm outside passed like an echo of the one they'd already survived. The morning broke clear, as if even the sky had decided to put the storms behind it. Sunlight filtered through the elms of Ravenhill's town square, dappling the red bricks with gold. A modest stage had been set up in front of the old war memorial, flanked by folding chairs and a podium adorned with the town's seal. There was no parade, no band, just people, quiet, expectant, and finally ready to listen. Jonas stood off to the side, dressed in a pressed button-down shirt and his best boots. He held his cane loosely, weight distributed carefully on his recovering leg. Next to him sat Clara, who had braided Emma's hair that morning with a red ribbon that matched her dress. It was the same ribbon she'd worn the day Hero first followed her home. And in front of them all, lying on a square of navy cloth beneath the podium, was Hero. He didn't understand the ceremony. The folding chairs, the cell phones, the police tape cordoning off the stage from foot traffic. But he knew people were calm. And calm was good. His ears perked slightly as the mayor stepped forward, holding a small box in his hand. "Good morning," the mayor began. "Today, we recognize not just a dog, but a citizen, a protector, a bridge between fear and understanding. His badge number was once K99. His name, Argos. To us now, he is simply Hero, and no title has ever been more earned." Applause rose, polite at first, then growing louder, richer, more certain. Jonas felt something loosen in his chest. Then the mayor knelt down. He opened the box and carefully pinned a small silver medal onto Hero's collar. On it were engraved 3 words: "For service rendered." Hero blinked slowly. He didn't wag, he didn't move. But his eyes found Emma's, and his tail thumped once, soft against the cloth. Then it was Emma's turn. Jonas gave her a gentle nod, and Clara squeezed her shoulder. Emma stepped onto the stage, small hands clutching a piece of notebook paper. The writing was uneven, the words printed in bright red marker. But her voice, when it came, was steady. "This is for Hero," she said. "I wrote it by myself." The crowd quieted. Emma looked at Hero, then began, "To the dog who remembered how to be brave, when everyone else forgot. You didn't have a house, or a bed, or anyone saying good boy, but you helped me anyway. You came back, even when they told you not to, and you didn't growl, even when they were mean. You just waited until someone saw you for real. Thank you for saving me, and thank you for not leaving when it got scary. I love you. Your friend, Emma." A breeze picked up, brushing the paper in her hands. But Emma held on. The crowd remained still for a beat. Then someone clapped. And then everyone did. Even Margaret Langford, seated stiffly in the 3rd row, offered a slow, solemn nod. After the ceremony, people came forward in ones and twos. Some left flowers, some knelt to pet Hero, who accepted each touch with quiet dignity. The mayor's wife placed a biscuit at his paws. A boy in a wheelchair whispered, "You're better than Batman." Hero didn't understand the words, but he understood something deeper, a feeling, a rhythm in the way hearts softened around him. He lay still, ears flicking only slightly, as Emma leaned into his side and said, "You're home now." Later that afternoon, the medal was mounted inside the Ravenhill firehouse just above the plaque. K9 Hero for Service Beyond Duty. Next to it, in a frame of cheap wood but priceless meaning, was Emma's letter, crayon-colored and signed with a paw print they'd pressed into ink together. Jonas stood there for a long time after everyone had gone, not speaking, just remembering. The town was asleep. Porch lights blinked out one by one, crickets resumed their quiet chorus, and the wind, gentler, now swept through the sycamores like a memory trying to whisper itself back into being. Jonas Hale walked slowly, a slight limp in his gait, the worn tip of his cane tapping softly against the cracked sidewalk. Beside him padded Hero, once Argos, once K99, his stride easy, tail low, ears relaxed. They made no sound together, just two silhouettes in the cool hush of night. The flood canal loomed ahead, no longer swollen with storm water, but dry now, save for scattered debris and a few glints of moonlight pooling in the low spots. Jonas stopped at the edge. He breathed in deep. The air smelled of damp earth and faint honeysuckle. The same canal had once nearly taken a child's life, had once swallowed his own nightmares, had once carried away the past. Hero sat down beside him, unprompted, still, steady. Jonas looked down at the dog. "Off duty," he said softly. The words hung in the air like something sacred. Hero turned his head slightly as if hearing something in the silence. Then he leaned in, not a command, not a trick, just a gesture of presence, of being. And for the first time, Jonas let his guard fall all the way. His fingers brushed the fur behind Hero's ears. "You don't have to prove anything anymore. No more floodwaters, no more commands, no more cages, just the sound of night, and breathing, and being seen for what you are, not what you were trained to be." Jonas sank onto the concrete ledge, and Hero followed, resting his head against the veteran's knee. The medal at his collar caught the light, a silver glint over a dark coat still bearing scars. Jonas closed his eyes. You reminded me of him." The words broke through something deep, old. "My last K9, Rook. He didn't make it out. I did." Hero didn't flinch. He just stayed, still, like memory itself. "I told myself I'd never partner again. Never let one of you back in. Too much pain, too much guilt." A long pause, a swallow of emotion. "But then there you were, dragging a girl out of a goddamn storm like it was nothing." Jonas laughed, softly, bitterly. "And now, look at us. Two old soldiers with limps and ghosts and maybe a second chance." Hero's eyes blinked slow. Jonas looked out over the dry canal where the moonlight stretched long and gentle across the concrete. The same space that once roared with floodwater and fear now looked strangely peaceful. Time had moved. The town had changed. And in this sliver of silence, Jonas understood something he hadn't dared before. He wasn't just healing. He was home. And Hero, the dog the town once feared, the stray some wanted put down, the soldier left behind, was no longer on alert. He was home too. No longer forgotten, no longer waiting, just home. Jonas stood slowly, joints creaking. "Come on," he whispered. Hero rose, brushing against his leg. No leash, no command, just trust. And as they walked away from the canal, the stars blinked quietly above them, not as witnesses, but as old companions. And somewhere between the footstep and the silence, a chapter closed. In a world that too often forgets its quiet heroes, Hero, once discarded, once feared, reminded us of something timeless. Loyalty doesn't wear out with age, and love doesn't need words to be understood. He wasn't just a German shepherd. He was a soldier without a uniform, a rescuer without a voice, a friend when it mattered most. This story isn't just about storms and second chances. It's about how sometimes the ones we're told to fear are the very ones who show us what courage really means. It's about a little girl who saw beyond the scars, a veteran who found healing in the eyes of a dog, and a town that finally listened, not with ears, but with heart. So if this story touched you, hold your pets a little closer tonight. Look twice at the strays. Speak up for those who can't. Because behind every forgotten paw print, there might be a hero just waiting to be remembered. Drop a 1 in the comments if you believe every dog deserves a second chance. And don't forget to subscribe for more true, heartfelt stories like this one. We'll see you in the next chapter.